My name is Evelyn Harper. I am 71 years old. 5 years ago, 3 different people told me the same sentence in 1 week. You're too old to start over. The first was my son. The second was my daughter-in-law. The third was the man who replaced me at work. Today, those same people sit in meetings waiting for my approval. But that's the end of the story. Let me tell you how humiliation feels when it arrives all at once. It begins quietly. I worked 38 years for the same manufacturing company. I started as an administrative assistant when I was 33 and worked my way up to operations coordinator. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. But I knew every vendor, every contract cycle, every shipment delay pattern from memory. I knew where money leaked. I knew which suppliers overcharged. I knew which managers inflated numbers to look efficient. I was stability. And stability is invisible until someone tries to replace it. The new CEO was 42. Brillant résumé. Sharp suits. Aggressive expansion strategy. Modernization, he called it. The first meeting he held with upper management included a slide titled, Future Ready Leadership. My name was not on that slide. 2 months later, I was asked to train a consultant to streamline processes. His name was Daniel. He was 30, confident in the way people are when they have never failed publicly. I'll need you to walk me through the legacy systems, he said casually. Legacy systems. That was what they called my work. For 3 weeks, I trained him. I documented procedures I had developed myself. I showed him vendor histories. I handed him decades of pattern recognition disguised as spreadsheets. At the end of the month, I was called into HR. Restructuring, they said gently. We're shifting toward digital optimization. Translation. You're expensive and aging. They offered a severance package that sounded generous until I calculated what it meant long-term. I signed. I walked out of that building with a cardboard box and 40 years of loyalty folded into a manila envelope. That was the first time I heard it. My son Mark came over that night. Mom, maybe this is a sign. You can slow down. You don't need to prove anything anymore. I'm not proving, I said. I'm working. You're 71. I'm not dead. He smiled in that uncomfortable way adult children do when they believe they're being kind. You've earned rest. Rest. It's a polite word for irrelevance. The second blow came 2 months later. I had always invested conservatively. After losing my position, I reviewed everything. I realized something unsettling. If I lived into my 90s, which women in my family tend to do, my savings would shrink uncomfortably under inflation. I wasn't desperate, but I wasn't secure enough to relax. So I did something that offended everyone. I decided to start a consulting firm. Not because I needed excitement. Because I understood inefficiencies in mid-sized manufacturing operations better than most consultants charging 6 figures. When I told Mark, he laughed softly. Mom, consulting? Competing with tech-driven firms? Yes. He shook his head. You don't even like Zoom. I can learn Zoom. That's when he said it. You're too old to start over. It wasn't cruel. It was dismissive. Dismissal cuts deeper. My daughter-in-law, Claire, was less subtle. With respect, she said over dinner. Companies want young energy. Digital natives. I built systems before you were born. I replied evenly. She smiled politely. That's kind of my point. The third person was Daniel, the consultant I trained. I ran into him at a supplier event 3 months later. I heard you're thinking about going independent, he said. I am. He tilted his head. That's ambitious. Yes. He paused, then delivered it casually. This industry moves fast. I understood what he meant. You don't. That night, I made a decision that changed everything. If I was going to be underestimated, I would weaponize it. I spent 6 months studying. Not casually. Aggressively. Digital supply chain tools. Automation software. Data visualization platforms. Remote auditing systems. I hired a 26-year-old freelance analyst to tutor me twice a week. The first session was humiliating. I couldn't navigate half the interfaces smoothly. But humiliation is temporary. Irrelevance is permanent, unless you fight it. Within a year, I launched Harper Operational Advisory. No investors. No partners. Just me. My first client came unexpectedly. A regional manufacturer I had worked with 15 years earlier called me privately. "We're bleeding cash," the owner admitted. "And we don't trust the big firms." "Send me your last 3 quarters," I said. I worked 16-hour days for 3 weeks. I found vendor redundancies, pricing inconsistencies, contract overlaps that no one had noticed. Within 4 months, I had saved them nearly $800,000. Word travels quietly in business circles, especially when it embarrasses larger firms. My second client came through referral, then a third. By the end of year 2, I wasn't staying busy. I was expanding. That's when the call came that made the irony almost poetic. The manufacturing company that had restructured me out had experienced a series of supply chain failures. Missed shipments, contract penalties, vendor disputes. Their internal optimization hadn't optimized. The board requested external review. They contacted Harper Operational Advisory. They contacted me. I agreed to a preliminary meeting. When I walked into the boardroom, Daniel was seated at the far end. He didn't smile. The CEO, who had presented future-ready leadership, looked measured. "Miss Harper," he said. "I let the silence hang just long enough. Consultant Harper is fine." Over the next hour, I asked questions no one else had thought to ask. I referenced vendor histories going back 15 years. I identified patterns in their new system that mirrored mistakes from a decade prior. Daniel tried to interrupt twice. I let him finish both times, then corrected him calmly. The board voted unanimously to retain my firm. 3 months later, I recommended restructuring the operations department. Performance-based evaluation, redundancy elimination, accountability metrics. Daniel's position was flagged as underperforming. The CEO resisted initially, but numbers do not negotiate. 6 months later, Daniel requested a transfer under my advisory oversight. Yes, under mina. He now submits reports that I review. My son Mark lost his tech job the same year the market contracted sharply. Layoffs. Startups collapsing. He called me one evening. I might need some advice. I listened. Then I offered him something he never expected. "I'm expanding. I need a logistics integration lead." There was a long pause. "You'd hire me? If you're willing to work for me." Silence again. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." Claire was quieter when she visited after that. She noticed the new office space, the growing team, the contracts framed on the wall. "I didn't realize it had grown this much," she said carefully. "You didn't think it would," I replied. That wasn't cruelty. It was fact. Today, my firm employs 11 people. Average age 34. They call me Evelyn. They also follow my directives. Last quarter, we closed our largest contract yet, multi-state manufacturing optimization. The CEO who once phased me out now asks for quarterly advisory sessions. Daniel presents performance updates with measurable improvements. Mark works long hours rebuilding his professional confidence under structured leadership. Mine. But here's the part no one sees. Starting over at 71 is not empowering every day. It is lonely. It is exhausting. There were nights I questioned whether my son was right, whether rest would have been easier. But easy is not the same as alive. They said I was too old to start over. What they meant was, "You are too old to threaten our assumptions." Age frightens people when it refuses to shrink. I did not rebuild my career to prove them wrong. I rebuilt it because I refused to disappear on schedule. And the most satisfying part? Not that they work for me, but that they now understand something they couldn't see before. Experience compounds. And when you underestimate someone who has spent decades mastering a system, you may eventually find yourself reporting to them. Success changes the way people look at you. Failure makes them pity you. Success makes them measure you. By year 3, Harper Operational Advisory was no longer a small consulting practice. We had recurring contracts. We had leverage. We had reputation. And reputation attracts two kinds of people: those who want to build with you, and those who want to control you. The first warning sign came disguised as opportunity. A private equity group reached out with interest in strategic partnership. Their proposal sounded flattering: expansion capital, national footprint, technology integration. In exchange, they wanted 60% controlling interest. "It's a growth move," their representative said smoothly across my conference table. At 74, I replied calmly, "I'm not looking to be absorbed." He smiled politely. "You can't scale alone forever." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was true, because it was bait. At the same time, tension inside my own firm began surfacing. Growth exposes weaknesses. One of my senior analysts, Caleb, brilliant but impatient, started pushing aggressive automation strategies without proper review. When I questioned his projections in a meeting, he challenged me publicly. "With respect, Evelyn, legacy thinking is slowing us down." The room went quiet. There it was again. Legacy. This time from someone on my payroll. I didn't react emotionally. "Run your model with corrected supplier volatility inputs," I said evenly. "Then we'll talk about speed." He flushed slightly, but that wasn't the end of it. 2 weeks later, I discovered Caleb had been in private discussions with the same private equity group that had approached me, sharing projections, inflating valuation assumptions, positioning himself as potential future CEO under acquisition. He wasn't stealing money. He was preparing to outgrow me. That hurt more than betrayal. It was ambition without loyalty. I called him into my office. "You've been talking to Crestline Capital," I said. His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. "They believe this firm needs younger leadership." "And you agree?" "I think you built something incredible," he said carefully. "But it could be bigger. Under someone else. Under scalable management." Scalable management. I studied him for a long moment. "Do you believe I built this by accident?" "No." "Do you believe I don't understand scaling?" He hesitated. "I believe markets move faster now." "Markets have always moved," I replied. "The only difference is who survives." He left my office that day uncertain. A month later he resigned and joined Crestline. They made another offer for my firm shortly after, more aggressive this time. I declined again. That's when the pressure shifted from polite to strategic. 2 of our mid-tier clients suddenly terminated contracts within weeks of each other. Coincidence is rare in business. One of my remaining clients called me privately. "They're telling people you won't modernize, that you're resistant to tech adoption." "They?" I asked. He didn't need to say the name. Crestline. And Caleb. Narrative warfare. Subtle. Professional. Damaging. Meanwhile, tension at home deepened. Mark was struggling. Working under your mother is different than asking her for advice. He had talent, but he had never operated inside a structure this disciplined. One evening he stayed late after everyone left. "I feel like I'm constantly being evaluated," he said. "You are," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "Do you ever stop?" "Not when I'm responsible for payroll." That wasn't the answer he wanted. "You're harder on me than the others." "Yes." "Why?" "Because if I favor you, they lose respect for both of us." He leaned back in his chair. "Sometimes I think you care more about the company than about me." That sentence landed heavier than anything Caleb had said. "I built this to avoid being dependent," I said quietly. "Not to replace family." "But it feels like a competition," he replied. Competition. That word again. I wondered if ambition always looks like rivalry to those closest to it. Weeks later, the real blow came. Crestline announced acquisition of one of our former clients and publicly credited modern restructuring insights from Caleb Pierce. It was a direct message. We can outpace you. Then came the lawsuit. A minor contractual dispute escalated unexpectedly. Crestline-backed legal counsel challenged our advisory compliance standards on a past engagement. It wasn't about the case. It was about pressure. My legal team assured me we were secure. But litigation drains energy. Energy drains focus. Focus drains momentum. For the first time in years, I felt tired in my bones. One night, alone in my office, I stared at the framed incorporation document on the wall. 71 when I signed it. 74 now. How long did I intend to fight? The easy move would have been to sell. Take the valuation. Secure generational wealth. Let younger executives scale. But easy had never interested me. The turning point came from somewhere unexpected. Daniel. Yes, the same Daniel I once trained. He requested a private meeting. I need to tell you something, he said, closing my office door. I've been approached by Crestline too. I assumed, I replied. They want me to transition fully. And he swallowed. I won't. That surprised me. Why? Because they don't fix companies, he said quietly. They flip them. I studied him. And you prefer fixing? He nodded. It was the first time I saw humility in him without defensiveness. They're planning something larger, he added. A coordinated narrative push. Articles. Market positioning. Framing you as outdated. I leaned back slowly. Thank you for telling me. I owe you, he said. Interesting. People grow. Sometimes under pressure. Sometimes under leadership they once resented. That night, I called a full leadership meeting. Not to defend. To pivot. If they want to define us as resistant, I said, we will out-innovate without selling our spine. We accelerated development of a proprietary hybrid oversight model. Human pattern recognition layered with digital analytics. Not flashy. Effective. We rolled it out across 3 pilot clients. Results outperformed projections by 18%. Industry publications noticed. Not because we paid them. Because outcomes speak. Then something shifted publicly. One of Crestline's high-profile acquisitions began bleeding capital due to over-automation without vendor context. Guess who understood vendor context? Within months, 2 of Crestline's clients approached us discreetly. You don't sell, one of them said. You stabilize. Stability. The word that once made me irrelevant now made me valuable. Meanwhile, Mark began finding his footing. He stopped bristling at oversight. He started anticipating it. One evening, he presented a revised integration model that improved workflow transparency by 12%. I ran volatility corrections, he said carefully. I almost smiled. Good. That was all I said. But he saw it. Respect. Earned. The lawsuit was dismissed. Quietly, Crestline's valuation dipped after a public mismanagement report. Caleb requested a meeting 3 months later. He looked older. Less certain. You were right about volatility inputs, he said stiffly. Yes. I thought speed was everything. It isn't. He exhaled. They're selling divisions already. Asset stripping. Predictable. I won't say I told you so, I added. He nodded. Are you hiring? That was the moment the narrative completed itself. They said I was too old to start over. Now they wanted back in. I didn't answer immediately. Do you understand what loyalty costs? I asked him. He didn't. Not yet. I'll consider it, I said finally. When he left, I sat alone again. But this time the silence felt different. Not lonely. Earned. Age does not disqualify ambition. It refines it. Starting over at 71 was not rebellion. It was refusal. Refusal to shrink for comfort. Refusal to retire into irrelevance. Refusal to let someone else schedule my disappearance. And here is the truth I've learned. People are comfortable with aging. They are uncomfortable with aging that competes. They said I was too old to start over. What they meant was, we're not prepared for you to evolve. But evolution does not require permission. And now when I walk into a boardroom, no one mentions age. They mention outcomes. They mention retention. They mention stability. And sometimes, when meetings end and the younger executives gather their laptops, I see something new in their eyes. Not dismissal. Not pity. Not even fear. Respect. Earned the long way. Through humiliation. Through litigation. Through betrayal. Through refusal. They said I was too old to start over. Now they work for me. And more importantly, they finally understand why.